Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So it's the start of July and you might think that we're coming towards the end of the planting season, but I assure you there's lots of things that you can still be planting now. In this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through those things that you can still sow in July and get a harvest this year. The way I'm going to split this video is I'm going to talk about some of those seeds that are getting a little bit late on to plant, so you need to get a move on with them. But I'm also going to be talking about some of those seeds that you've got plenty of time and you've still got a couple of months to get planting. So these peas were planted out in March and we're having an absolute awesome crop from them. Peas aren't just an early season crop, you can still get them sown direct into the ground now and get a harvest before the frosts come for this year. And remember, peas are frost tolerant, so even if you get some light frosts early on, you'll still be okay. So underneath this arch, I've got my runner beans planted on one side and I've got cucumbers planted on another side. What I'm going to do is, while these cucumbers are still finding their feet and getting themselves grown up, I deliberately left a couple of empty canes between the cucumbers, and that's so I can get some peas planted in. So we're going to have harvest from the other plants for at least a couple of months or so. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to drop a couple of peas in. I'm just going to stick two in the same planting hole, and I'm just going to let them grow up. Okay, and I'm going to do that at all of these spare canes that I've got. And what that'll allow us to do, it'll allow us to get a harvest of peas well into autumn and possibly even into the start of winter. We're absolutely chocked for space at the minute, so what I'm trying to do is find any little nook and cranny that I can find to squeeze an extra few plants in, and that's what I'm going to do. I did a video on companion planting and interplanting and successional sowing. If you haven't seen that, do go and check that out once you finish this video, because it's full of really useful information on how you can maximize your space. In the same way, I've got a little bit of an edge for the side of this bed. My pumpkins are going that way. I'm going to do my last sowing of beetroot right here. We're already having lots of harvests of beetroot and beet leaves, and what we're doing is we're picking as we're going. Here's a row that's nearly ready of beetroot, and remember, the whole plant of beetroot's edible, so you can pick the leaves and you can take those as well. But we are getting quite close to the end of growing beetroot for a full crop. Probably July, start of August, you can still get away with getting some in. But in this gap between my beetroot and my onions, I'm going to start getting some more plants sown here. So I'm just going to make a shallow drill. I'm going to get some spinach sown right into here. So remember, spinach and beetroot are from the same family. Spinach has been bred specifically for the leaves, whereas beetroot's been bred for the root. And that's why you'll see things like on chard, you'll see quite big roots established for chard. So I'm just going to make some of my last sowings of spinach as well. You might have noticed when it comes to this time of year that chard and spinach starts to bolt, so get some more sowings in and just keep that perpetual sowing and that continuous sowing. These will be ready in about 2 months. We can be harvesting again while we're picking the last little bits of the other spinach that we've got already planted, because you can see some of these are bolting. We'll probably pick the last lot of these this month. Normally what I do is, when I remove plants, is I'll cut them off at the base and I'll leave the root to rot in the ground. But with these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the whole root out, because I want that soil to be loosened underneath. And then what I'll do in there is I'll plant my carrots. So I'll plant a couple of last sowings of carrots wherever I can find some space. Anywhere I can find some space, I'm going to plant some carrots. There's a couple of really good varieties that you can go for. You can go for something like Amsterdam Forcing or Carrots Early Nantes and go for a quick to crop harvest, or you can go for I'm not even sure how to pronounce the name of this one. Yeah, can you see the name? So you can Burley Kuma or something like that, Burley Kuma or whatever. Okay, you can you can look, if you've watched my videos before, you know how I mangle names. So anyway, these are an overwintering variety or a late season variety, so get some of these sown in and these are supposed to grow large, and they'll grow for a late season. So I'm going to direct sow some of these carrots as well. Once I've finished harvesting these lettuces and these spinach, these will go in along with some of my early Nancy's as well. Like I mentioned in my companion planting video, anywhere you've got a heavy feeder, try and plant in some sort of legume or something. And what I'm going to do here is I've got my gourds and tyres over here. What I've got is a gourd going up, and at the base of the gourd I've got a chili plant, and I've got this area here, and I've got a couple of options. I can throw a few carrot seeds in there, and because it's a deep pot or a deep planting bed, the carrots have got plenty of space to grow. But what I'm going to do rather than that is I'm going to stick a couple of dwarf French beans into there. There's still plenty of time to sow dwarf French beans and get them going, and you'll do really well with them. There's still plenty of time. I've got some young seedlings. I've got some that are starting to flower. I've got some young seedlings as well coming up that have been direct sown. And here, any space that I get like this, I'm going to stick another one in the ground. So keep sowing your herbs, things like coriander, basil, parsley, all of these kind of herbs that you're going to be using every day to flavour your food. Keep sowing them, getting them in the ground, and sow little and often, and so you're getting a continuous harvest. And that's, I've done a brilliant video on coriander growing. If you haven't seen that, you really are missing out. I've just shown you that I've sown some spinach, but get some more salad crops in the ground, things like lettuces. Get them growing. But if you're going to sow them direct in the ground, make sure you take some slug control measures. It's supposed to be July, it's overcast and it's spitting with rain. This is perfect weather for slug attacks, so really do take some slug prevention measures. I've done a really good video on using nematodes to control slugs. I'll leave a link for it up here. Do go and check that out, and you can use that without going for harmful toxic chemicals. Like I was saying, you can plant French dwarf beans anywhere you get a chance, and that's what I've done here in between my onions. And I've got an idea actually of one of the things that I'm going to do. So this gutter is where I sowed my peas, and I planted the peas directly outside. Now, because I'm running out of space, I got an idea from this volunteer plant actually. This is a mustard leaf, and this is the plant that we call light, and I love this. Is one of my favourites in a salad. And this actually volunteered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just fill this up with compost, and because it doesn't need a lot of space, I'm just going to fill this up with compost and sprinkle a few lye seeds in here, and just leave it somewhere lying about that I don't have to worry about. They don't need a lot of care. Just plant them and forget about them. So that's what's going to happen with this. So I'm just going to get a crop of lye into that gutter. So mustard greens, that's a really good one to plant. So that brings me on nicely to those plants that you want to plant now and harvest late on into the season and early next year. So start thinking about planting your kales. Think about some overwintering cabbages, overwintering broccolis, and overwintering Brussels sprouts. So if you want to get those in the ground, start sowing them now into little containers, and then you can plant them out towards the end of this season and get them established before the winter sets in, and you can have an early harvest of those. So look how beautiful this amaranth is, and we're coming up to quite a few of our plants are starting to flower and produce seed. We're going to save the seed for next year's sowings. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to sow load more of them, and we should be able to still get a harvest this year. I showed you my onions outside. Spring onions are still fine to grow now. This month is still a good month to plant spring onions, not a problem at all. But I'm going to go on to planting something else. Normally people talk about planting onions towards the end of the year, but that's with main crop onions. I'm going to go for some Japanese sensu onions, overwintering variety onions, and I'm going to sow them right now. I'm just going to firm my compost down, and I'm going to get my onions sowed into here. And the reason that you sow the Japanese onions now is they'll have a couple of months to get themselves established and form little bulbs. You can get them planted into the ground around September time and leave them to overwinter, and they'll give you an earlier crop of onions next year. And this is a particularly handy one to be growing if you have things like white rot. So people with allium white rot, if you suffer from allium white rot, then overwintering onions or early varieties of onions these are the ones for you to go for. So this is one that I'm going to go for now. Just go for a heavy sowing of onions. It doesn't matter that I'm growing them quite thick. I'll be thinning them out as I go, as they get ready for planting. So just a little dusting of compost over the top. My DIY potting table has come in really handy this year. If you haven't seen this potting table and how I've made it, this is another one that you're absolutely missing out. It's an absolute genius idea, even if I do say so myself. I don't often brag about my ideas, but this potting table has been absolutely brilliant. A lot of people have started imitating this and doing their own jobs, and they're doing better jobs actually. But here's quite an unusual one for you to be growing. If you go into any of the Asian grocery shops, what you'll find is a plant that looks like a potato. It's a little bit hairier and a little bit smaller, and it's called an Edo, or often people call them Edo, Muki, taros. Here is what I've got them. I've got some planted here. So I've got some that I overwintered. So these have been grown for a couple of years now, and they produce the corms, they produce the runners or lota that we eat. And just behind them is I've just freshly sprouted some more taro, and I've just planted them just there. And I grow them in these containers because they are a late season plant, or they are a long season plant rather, and if it's starting to get a little bit cold for them, I'll just shift the whole tray into the greenhouse and I'll still be able to harvest the leaves. And again, it's one of those plants that are completely edible from root to tip. Speaking of tubers, you might not think it, but potatoes are an absolute brilliant one to plant now. A lot of people will be harvesting their first early, second early potatoes now, and once you've harvested, if you've got a spare container and you've got a spare potato seed, then get the potato planted again, and you'll be harvesting in time for Christmas. So you can have a late season harvest, so around Christmas time, around early January, around the end of winter, you can have some potatoes to be harvesting. And that's what I'm doing right now as well. Typical, as we're filming, it started raining, but it's not all bad. Do go and check out those videos that I mentioned, especially the ones on coriander and building the potting table. So it's starting to come down a bit heavier, and I'm starting to get a little bit wet, so I'm going to head inside. Don't forget to hit the like for me, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.